Well, hello there. Welcome to another Seeing Clearly with Charlotte Giblin. You know the score by now, don't you? Just me and you. Sometimes there's a painting there. You know it's going to be a good video if there's a distressing painting like that next to me, next to my smiling face. Ooh, what's going on? This is, again, lifting the veil on the illusion that we just get fed so often through film, through social media, trying to share some connecting universal stories, my experiences as an artist, as a creative human being. And boy, have I struggled with that. I mean the human being bit, not the creative bit. Never struggled with that aspect. You know, I do one take. This is unedited. There's no script. That's also part of my desire to share a real-time conversation, real-time experience with you. And the editing, the fast forwarding, that's up to you. This is all about me sitting down and sharing what I feel is relevant, what might be able to help you on your journey as this information and these experiences have helped me. And the importance of really knowing that you're not alone. I know that is key through the triumphs, but mostly through the challenges, because a lot of people don't share them. So yes, this painting has been inspired by, well, not this painting, this wasn't inspired by this week's conversations, this is from 5 years ago. But the theme of this video has been inspired by some recent conversations with creative friends who have been really struggling with inspiration, motivation. Maybe it's because it's the start of the year. Maybe it's because there's an awful lot of challenging stuff going on globally, but when isn't there? And as sensitive human beings, we can find that the news can affect us more than other people. And I want to ask the question, and I'll partly answer it, ask the question, what's the point of it all? And I don't just mean because that's a lifelong psychological, philosophical quest, isn't it? What's the point of our creativity when we feel a sense of unfairness or injustice happening around us, to us? How can it help? What experiences have I had that I feel might assist you on your journey? And when I feel that there have been a few people asking the same question of late, then I think, well, maybe there's somebody else out there who would benefit from what I've discovered in this arena of life. This painting was painted in 2018. It's called Too Much. And it was at one of the lowest points of my life. And this is what I want to start by discussing and then develop into the ways that our creative practice can assist us. I mean, for a lot of people, it's obvious how our creative practice can assist us, but there may be more layers to it than you are aware of. And I think it can be very helpful being aware of different layers, whether you take it on board as part of your emotional development, personal development, and creative practice is another thing. But I've found it very helpful to understand the layering behind my really difficult patches in life. And it might surprise you as to how banal my lowest point might be. And that's a key point I want you to bear in mind, which I will come back to, because all of our experiences are relative, aren't they? I was at the end of a 9-month period of full-time painting. We'd just moved to New Plymouth in New Zealand, where I'm currently living. And I've been preparing for a portrait exhibition. If you've seen the video, portrait of my mum, that was part of that exhibition. I did 7 paintings of women. I've been working very, very hard at that. I then had an open studio here as part of an art trail, and I had an exhibition. I had 10 pieces in a group show down in Wellington, which is the capital of New Zealand, all happening within a short period of months at the end of this 9-month extended period of full-time painting. I really believed this was the absolute launch pad for my artistic career, my fine art career. We'd moved. I felt like I was leaving a lot of the part-time jobs behind, my teaching behind. I felt like this is what I've always dreamed of, full-time fine artist, all of these opportunities, all of this different work that I was bringing together and presenting to the public for sale. This was it. This was absolutely my launch pad. I was so convinced about that because I'd been led to believe, or I had convinced myself, that by pumping out positivity and optimism into the universe, that we are then rewarded for that there's this wonderful energetic exchange. And I've got to be in the top 1% of positive people that I've ever met. And so naturally, I thought, I've been putting out all of this positivity into the world and helping people for so long that now it's my time, and I'm going to sell all my paintings, all of them, and riches will be bestowed upon me and fame as an artist, and I never have to look back and I can leave behind all of my troubles and worries. Now, I'm probably not the only person who's ever thought that. This may be a new thread of thought for you, but for me, oh no, this was it. I was on the brink of the most incredible career and stardom. And you know what's going to happen, don't you? I mean, look at the state of that. So not only did I not do particularly well in any of the exhibitions, did I sell 2 portraits at the time? I did. I sold 2 of the portraits in the exhibition. Didn't sell a sausage or a painting in either of the other opportunities. And what that meant was I had not only invested 9 months of full-time work and for thousands of dollars of materials cost. Forget about, I mean, as artists, rarely include our hours, do we, in an equation like this. So much money had been invested into my dream, into these 3 opportunities, and it all came to a head on, it was a Sunday in June. and I knew that at the end of the art trail, the open studio, and it coincided with the last day of the exhibition in Wellington. And I was just so full of hope. And, you know, I've read all these things, never think anything negative, just focus on the positive. So I was just imagining the phone call saying, oh, Charlotte, you've sold all your paintings. I was really putting that out there. Well, that didn't work. Yeah, and it came crashing down around me a few days later, where I realized that in my eyes, I'd completely failed. And this is a really important point of the story, is understanding when you've got the perspective and the distance from any kind of incident which is very distressing. Well, why was it so distressing? Why did it create such a negative reaction in me? What was that all about? And for me, if you've seen any of my videos before, you will know that I carried with me for the longest time a sense of responsibility for those around me. And that extended to a responsibility / guilt about my creative practice and how much money it was costing. And this was almost around the time when my partner was really struggling with his job as a chef and very much needed to step away from that industry. I did a video about that a few weeks ago in more detail. So there was an awful lot hanging on this trio of this holy trinity of exhibition and sales opportunities that I had, and no money came in. Now, in my backpack of emotional stuff that I've been carrying with me my entire life, there's a huge section under the umbrella of independence and wanting people to be proud of me and wanting to please other people, wanting to create a sense of pride around with those who love me. And a huge part of that, because I've always worked in the arts, which is notoriously difficult arena to make any kind of decent money or any sort of independent income without other jobs, I really, really wanted to prove to all of the people who'd supported me over the years, financially, emotionally, I really wanted to prove that it had been worth their support. It was worth everything that I'd put into it. And this is really important because I was only defining my success in financial return in sales. I was ignoring how much it was giving me, how much it was assisting the people around me, telling the stories through my paintings, connecting with them at the exhibitions, at the open studio art trail, the stories of the portraits. I negated all of that and was just looking at the bottom line of, well, how much money am I going to make? Because that meant I could save myself, I could save my partner from his job, I could be the hero in the story and earn enough money to get us out of the difficulties that I could see were approaching. And I had a full-on little girl, poor me the victim breakdown. It's that simple. There was a lot of snot and tears. I think I might even have stamped my feet a few times. And I came into the studio and wailed a bit. But quietly, I didn't want to disturb anybody. But Pete, who's always been very intuitive and can sense when there's, disturbance in the force, with me anyway, or maybe I was not quite so obvious, as much more obvious than I thought I was, came down and, you all right? No. Right, okay. So clearly things are not okay. And I can remember saying through the snot and the tears that in 1 month we were out of money. And that was a very sobering thought because I had taken full responsibility for all of the administration within our relationship and paying bills. And I could see us running out of money and I could see how much money I was spending. So there was a layer of guilt there and a layer of desperation. And with a little bit of hindsight, I feel that that is the answer to the cosmic or spiritual question of why wasn't I rewarded with money? Because it was just about the money and it was about this negative belief that I was only worthy if I was earning money as a creative. I had bypassed the point of my creativity. And that didn't occur to me at the time. And that was something that I realized later on. But in that moment, it was so devastating to feel. It was like a full-on tsunami of rejection from everybody who had come into the studio or anybody who'd looked at my paintings. And it wasn't about the paintings anymore. It became a full rejection of me. And that was incredibly distressing. And my ego was totally crushed and crumpled by that. And I believe I even wailed into the ceiling of, well, it's not fair, why me? I think there was a bit of that going on. And, impressive stuff. And 2018, 43, you know, but this is the point, that we all have different levels of where our breaking point is and what is important to us. And this was such a pivotal breaking point for me because of all of the other emotional weight that I'd adopted, all of the roles that I'd taken on board and everything. This seemed to destroy all of my perceived purpose in one go, because I was going to be this incredible, optimistic, successful artist who was going to be a trailblazer for all of the other people like me who hadn't been able to be successful financially before this point. So I was going to prove that it could be done. And instead what happened was that it proved that I couldn't do it at that stage and in that way. And I painted that away from all of my happy, jolly everything. I mean, you may have seen the films where I did my self-portraits climbing out of the frame. That was the pivotal change point for me in 2015, 2016, when I realized there was a little bit going on beneath the hood. But this was the first time that I so clearly wanted to address my own despair. And that is a very good word for it. And some people who I've spoken to in the past about this whole the pressure that we can put on ourselves as creatives, especially the guilt of money, spending money in hard times where you feel like you don't have the money, creating the space for yourself, time-wise or physically in a house, to be able to do your creative pursuit beyond the list of jobs that you feel ought to come first, or the responsibilities to family members or bill paying. Yeah, there's so many different layers of pressure that just as human beings, and then you have the additional sensitivity as a creative and the additional expense that can be involved with creating, with painting, any kinds of artistic practice. And it did help to paint this picture. I mean, the whirling, swirling, just tumultuous washing machine of negative thoughts spiraling round, and, you know, the fingers like buried in the head, unable to pull out all of the problems that I was feeling, that sense of absolute crushing despair. And I think it probably did help me to paint it, but I expect that I was already over it by the time I'd painted that. And this was documenting that period of time, because the important part of this story is not just talking about those moments where we all feel absolutely awful, because we do, don't we? And there can be a guilt with that, when it certainly was for me. I would think, well, we've got a roof over our heads, there's food on the table, we're both healthy, we can get jobs. Why am I feeling the sense of injustice and that things aren't fair? And we can give ourselves even more of a hard time there, because our own experiences of grief, of loss, of difficulty are completely relative to what we've experienced already, and how our chemistry and hormones work, how all of that is layered. I know that over the years, members of my mum's family just couldn't understand why she couldn't just snap out of it. Why can't she just eat a proper meal? And what's her problem? Why is she having so much anxiety? Can't she just see that she is like the luckiest person in the world, being rescued by my dad, and she can stay at home and doesn't have to work? You know, I was very empathetic to my mum's anorexia and nervous anxiety. And that allowed me eventually to be a little bit kinder to myself when I felt these layers of guilt for really not having any perceived problems. And yet for me, it felt like the end of the world that I couldn't earn any money from my art. But it's understanding the layers behind that grief, loss, trauma. Like, why is it so visceral, and what is it that's triggering all of that difficulty and that trauma? And as I've explained, for me, it was this responsibility and this guilt and this wanting to not be reliant on other people financially. I really wanted to be able to stretch out, spread my wings, and show that it had been worth the journey and worth the investment. And still, I still can't afford to fly to the UK. I don't earn enough money. My dad pays for my flight. I'm nearly 50. And you kind of get used to adjusting your expectations. I've stopped being hard on myself about that because I understand now that there are very different reasons for me being creative. It's not just about the financial aspect. That has some relevance because I'm a full-time artist. But my teaching practice came out of this really low point because the constant thread of inquiry in my open studio and anywhere I went was the word had spread that I'd been teaching up in Whitianga in the Coromandel, and people wanted to learn. They wanted to learn from me. And from that point, I dusted off my ego and realized it was very important to earn money. I needed to support my partner. I needed to support us. We had bills to pay. And the fragile, thin veil of expectation that I'd had about my career rocketing from that point on, after that had been completely destroyed, it was the grounding realism that I needed, and to understand that I could offer so much more by teaching and sharing my experiences and skills as an artist and helping other people to learn. And this is an ongoing part of my process, which is why I'm talking to you about this. It's the sharing of experiences, but also offering a way through. So at this point, I have been known many times, maybe a few times, when I've been watching the news, all feels a bit bleak. Perhaps I've been stressing about a painting, or I've been wringing my hands over the fact that I haven't sold any paintings and I was going to need to run another block of classes, and it felt like it was stifling my freedom and creativity. And then I'd see just bad news story after bad news story, and I would just say, oh, well, what's the point? What's the point in me painting or spending any time doing anything creative when we're up against all of this? And my partner would say to me, and I've taken this on board, that, well, that is the point, because there is such a barrage of negativity that is fed to us. And I did do a video where I addressed that whole balance of, I think it was the one about Mum as well, her painting, that whole balance of the expectation of negativity and pain, and why we embrace that fully. And we almost feel guilty when things go well, and we're waiting for things to go badly. And why is that in the human experience and condition? That's a side story. But the point is that when things feel so overwhelmingly out of control or negative, there are so very few people that can directly, positively impact some of the terrible stories that you see on the news. But each of us can directly, positively impact our own experience of the world right now. It might feel impossible. It might feel like There's, you know, we're a tiny little ant on an enormous island, but our experience can be altered by what we do and how we think. So as creative people, whether it's writing out your distress, your anger, your frustration, and I'm a journaler, I'm a writer. That's how I get a lot of my angst out. I go for fast walks if I'm feeling particularly angry about something, with angry music in my ears, and I will get the adrenaline out of my body. You don't always have to channel your creativity into something physical or something positive. You don't just have to make a pretty picture to feel better. You can express your frustration in all different kinds of ways. And I think we're discouraged from expressing our frustration. You've got to be careful how you do it. I mean, all of the ways that I'm suggesting, they're with yourself, they're individual, and no harm is caused. It's putting thoughts onto paper, it's walking fast and removing the adrenaline from your body, or splash some paint around, or get some charcoal and be vigorous with your movements, or just sit and really look at an object and think about how you would paint it, how you would draw it. There are ways that we can, as creatives, slow down our mind, eradicate those fast-moving, fearful thoughts, and focus on something completely different, which is just ours. And that gift cannot be underestimated. It gives you an enormous power. And it doesn't need to be about a finished product. It doesn't need to be about a finished sale. It certainly doesn't need to be about a large number of people standing around you and applauding and saying, well done, you're amazing. This can be something which is an outlet just for you. And I have a lifetime of experience of using my art to help me move away from anxious thoughts by creating my own world, by focusing on something else, by having by having music in the background, by distracting myself and putting it into something beautiful. And I don't mean that everything I've created, this is not beautiful. I mean a positive form of creation, of thought. And of course, it can feel totally overwhelming with the fact that we're just one person, and what's the point in rinsing out this yogurt pot and recycling when there's just so many problems in the world. But by channeling a lot of that angst into something positive for yourself for a short period of time, and shifting your mindset for that short period of time, can have the most remarkable effect building up over a long period. And when I talk about the Charlotte who painted this, I'm really telling a story about somebody I think I might have heard about, because she doesn't exist anymore. The transformation from this wailing Charlotte, I mean, the elements of her still exist, but I don't have this kind of traumatic response or expectation of myself, because I've worked through so much of it over the years and have allowed myself to be vulnerable, to be human, to not to feel so guilty about those days where actually everything just feels a bit too much, and there doesn't feel like there's so much point in doing a beautiful painting, so I'll step away from it, or I'll write instead, or I'll do something else. But whenever you feel like there isn't any point to your art practice, or maybe there's a real vein of grief going through your life at the moment, and your sense of loss and your sense of upset or your fear just feels like it's hampering you from doing anything, and just everything feels bleak, there's always just that little moment where you can just start moving yourself towards the healing process of your creativity. And just even 5 minutes of doing an angry or a sad drawing, or getting a piece of paper out, or listening to some sad music and having a good cry into your paint. I've done that before. Doesn't do acrylic any good, makes it very watery. But there are so many ways in which our art practice, it's absolutely vital, not just for us, but as a way of expressing and expanding our positive, healing, sad, human thoughts out into the world. So when it all feels too much, just remember you've been given this incredible gift for seeing things differently, for colour, for light, for looking at the world in a different way. And know that you're not alone with your struggles, with the sense of injustice or it's not fair. Allow yourself to stamp your feet a little bit, and don't feel bad that somebody who might pass you in the street actually has very different things, relevant things to be upset about. You're allowed to feel terrible at times. It is part of the experience, but understanding how the sun always rises the next day and how you can actually move through it and how important art can be for you. Felt like I really needed to say that, and maybe I'm saying it to myself and a younger version of myself, and also just tying up a lot of the subjects I've been talking about with some of my creative friends this week. When everything feels a little bit tough, reach out and talk to somebody. And I hope this has helped somewhat. It certainly helped me to talk about it. And maybe that's the only thing that I can worry about. It's made my life better today. So hopefully it's helped you too. I'll see you in the next one. Bye.